Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlawn Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlawn Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Well, you should have a little.
Justice Paul Anderson has been with us on Access to Democracy more than all the other judges combined.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
I don't know what it says about you.
Well,
Justice Anderson, who sits on the Minnesota Supreme Court with great dignity, who's respected worldwide, and always a pleasure. You've been here virtually 36 times now.
I have. I noticed a deficiency on your logo, though. Why don't you have a number down there that tells people how many shows you've done? How many? You've done over 1,000, haven't you?
We have done someplace between 1,450 and 1,500 shows.
Really? So you don't know the exact number, so you can't put it there.
We are, well, I did at one time. When I wrote the book, in which you were featured prominently, we had done almost 1,300 shows. And that was 2 years ago that was written.
Oh.
You know, we average 75 to 100 shows a year.
We got to get, you promised me some hard questions, but you know that I care about civics education, and I would be remiss if I didn't compliment you as the civics education component that this show really does fill and deal with as far as the general population. You know, as Thomas Jefferson said, you know, it's this whole voting thing, you know, we got through this whole voter ID and whatever. So if you don't trust people with the vote, you know, don't take it away from them, educate them. And Jefferson, I think, would like you.
Well, I like Jefferson, so. And we were schoolmates.
You were?
But, actually, civics is a part of school curricula that's disappearing, and this saddens me greatly. We're not really emphasizing the things that were so important to me. Civics classes, history classes, things like that. We're so moving into computerization, but we're not teaching some of the things that are really foundational in our education.
That's dangerous for a democracy.
Very dangerous.
Because it makes people more prone to distortion, polarization. They can frustration with the way government works, feeling that they have an inability to change things. They can, definitely, but it's an estrangement from the process that I think is a fallout from a failure to have the proper civics education.
And a person like Paul Wellstone, the late Paul Wellstone, personified the fact that the little guy can become really a major player on a national scene. Al Franken went from really writing jokes to hosting a talk show, to the point where he's really been involved in some really important legislation.
I started out milking cows. My mother would sell eggs, get the grocery money. Hopefully the eggs would cover the grocery money. We used, you know, as a secondhand clothes that I was growing up. I never felt, you know, that I was poor, but, you know, is it, you know, I just, you got to get into your tough questions. But I really don't like these people who want to shrink government so they can drown it in a bathtub, because in a way I think they're unpatriotic. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness comes from Aristotle and Plato, and says that government can't guarantee happiness, but it has an obligation, it has a role to provide the maximum opportunity for the maximum number of people to achieve happiness. That's why civics is important, because if you teach civics, you can tell you can be happy, you can be part of the system, you can make a difference.
And that has come through in a lot of the decisions that you have been involved in terms of that philosophy and an expansive view of what we are all about as a country, as a democracy. That's one of the things that we will be missing, and I think that you're going to be missing because you're facing mandatory retirement in 4 months. And I think that Minnesota, which is cutting edge in many respects, is behind the 8 ball on this one. New York, a judge can be renewed until he's 76. Every 2 years, he has to be reviewed for mental faculties, etc., and can be renewed until 76. I don't think that somebody who's really in their prime, and I consider you to be one of those somebodies, should have to step down when you have so much to contribute.
See, I'm okay with it. Now, I can debate with you whether it should be 70, 72, whatever. I mean, I would debate more strongly if you have somebody who comes on the court at age 62 and a longer period of time. But I'm okay. You know, is that Chris Christopherson has a new song, is it Facing Mortality? And there's some line in there, I don't know if you heard it, and it says, I think something to the effect, am I comfortable where I am now? And my answer to that would have to be yes. Even though I'm facing mandatory retirement, I'm very comfortable where and who I am right now. So it is what it is.
We'll have you back in June, and we'll ask you how comfortable you are in June. Although I assume that you'll remain in chambers for a period of time working on decisions that still...
No, actually I won't. Everything that I participate in will have to be out by the 31st of May, but I actually will stay in the Judicial Center for 2-3 months. I told the Chief Justice I will be out of the retired justices' chamber by the end of August, because I don't like the idea of hanging around too long, but I have... a lot of stuff to sort through. I have a great judicial assistant, Elaine, and she is horrified with all the stuff that I have to sort through before I leave, because it's not just me it affects those around me.
Well, that's interesting, and it probably is frightening, but you're going to do it because you always do.
Oh yeah, and that's starting a little bit.
Do you
by the way, I'm already planning, I mean, I've always wanted to write a book about the 1990 governor's election, and I met with somebody this morning to start my process going. So I'm going to be busy.
You're going to write it, though, right?
I'm going to write it. No, this is someone who worked on the campaign who has information that I'm on.
Okay. Yeah.
And fortunately, her memory is still very good, so it's going to be fun.
Good. That's book number 1. Book number 2 is going to be about your judicial career.
Yeah, I've got somebody that's interested in working with me on that.
I bet you do.
I mean, somebody else wants me to just do a book of my stories, you know, historical stories. And that's one of the things they'll probably miss, is they bring up something historic on the court, and I said, well, I'll tell you why this is the way it is. And that's kind of fun.
Will you have anything to do with the picking of your successor?
No. Well, I got to say, I have been consulted about what type of person to look for. And I have met with the governor and his point person on the process, saying what I think the qualities are. For anybody who I think is in the ballpark to be a successor, if they want to come and talk to me, I will talk to them. So I've visited with probably at least a half-dozen people who have sought me out and wanted to figure out what it takes to be a judge. And if I think they're a player, I'm going to talk to him about it. I have told the governor that I will not answer the question of if he's got a list of finalists, who should he appoint? Because I don't know the whole criteria. Everything's on the table for him.
He probably wouldn't ask that question, knowing this governor.
Yeah,
also.
probably he wouldn't. I did say that if I would answer the question if I think somebody is not qualified, and then I would have to give the reasons. I don't anticipate that. The process is going on now.
If he calls me, I'll answer the question. However,
okay, you will. I assume you will. You never reticent either to ask or answer questions.
No. Even though I'm a right-wing ideologue, as you introduced me as we came into this thing, but no, it's a very serious situation. We have a divided court right now.
Yes, it is.
Not divided the way I would like to see it divided. It's moved to the right in the period of time that in the 15 years that I'm in Minnesota.
Now, I'm going to tell you something that is bothersome to me, but I've talked with people who are going to apply, is that I think that the former Governor Pawlenty has changed the paradigm slightly for the selection process. I think he did the Minnesota Supreme Court, the citizens of this state, a great disservice when in Iowa he bragged about changing a moderate Supreme Court into a conservative Supreme Court. And he even named one of his appointees as an example of what he was doing, much to the discomfort of the appointee. But what that will do as far as changing the paradigm is the people who are around Governor Dayton who will say, well, you got Pawlenty doing this, you got to do the polar opposite. Now, I think you're right. This governor is beholden to no one, so he's going to pick who he thinks best. But I don't
I think he did that with Judge Wright.
Oh yeah, he did. I mean, very clearly that's what was going on. But I don't like that paradigm change where you have a governor going and bragging is that I have made appointments to the court and then moved it to a conservative. He's got the right to do it, and he can do it, but you don't.
He was running for president.
I know, and he was trying to garner support.
Time, and I think he did disservice to the state in many respects.
No, I'm not going to get into that, but understand, I am responding on this as a judge and how it affects the third branch. If you're a politician, you're a partisan, I mean, you may see it differently, but
justice is blindfolded for a reason. The statue of justice is blindfolded because justice is supposed to be impartial. That's not the way it's being done in many of the states now, as people really are consumed with ideology, but it's the way it should be, and it's the way that the courts function best. And I can imagine the justice who was deemed a right-wing justice being very uncomfortable because that's not the way they should be selected.
And that justice isn't. And by the way, we have, despite that, this is why I say it's unnecessary for the governor to say that, because we have good people on our court. They're conscientious. They work hard, and they, for the most part, want to do the right thing. So, but it's that we go back to civics education. What kind of a civics education message does the governor send when he makes a statement like that?
Not a good one. Not a good one. And ideology has its place, but not in the court system.
So, but I'm confident that the governor is now, Governor Dayton is beholden to no one, and he said it is problematic though. I saw him about a week ago, and he said, there's a downside to this process. I can only make one friend. And all the others, they are disappointed. And they said, that's a tough thing for the governor to do. There's only one, and there are going to be a lot of qualified people.
Well, unless he gets them all together and lets them pick straws.
Yeah. No,
and I don't think he's the man who would do that.
No.
And, of course, then Justice Page is going to retire a year after you do.
2 years.
2 years after
August
you do.
of 2015.
So the face of the court is ever-changing.
And the governor's going to have a chance to mold that new face, to sculpt that new face, is the way I put it.
Yeah. Now, the last appointment of Governor Pawlenty was a young justice who's been here several times and is going to be here again, and Justice Strauss, who is a really, really good scholar.
Oh, can I comment on that?
Absolutely.
I mean, he does bring the insights of an academic and insights of someone who is very familiar with the jurisprudence of the United States Supreme Court. And of course he clerked there. And I'm just finishing up an opinion right now. And I thought I had it pretty good. And he made some comments. He said, you know, I'm not going to tell you how to write it, whatever. But just 2 or 3 perceptive, insightful comments have caused me to rewrite a significant part of that opinion, not to change it, not to change the result, but just to make it clearer and more precise. And I cannot understate the value of something like that on a court.
And of course, he comes from a more conservative background.
Oh, yes.
But when it gets into the constitutional questions and in some of the criminal law questions, it's been very clear that he adheres to what the Constitution says.
This is where this whole thing about liberal conservative on justices or whatever. What's liberal and conservative on the issue of closing a courtroom? You'll see his jurisprudence. He's very careful about openness and having an open courtroom. What's liberal and conservative on free speech? In the Crowley case, I mean, he's very protective of free speech. So it's a very hard to paint with a very broad brush.
So we know that you're probably going to be involved in writing of a book or 2 books in the future, but that's not going to take up all your time. So, and we know you like gardening, and we know you like bicycling.
I do the grunt work, you know. I said it's the hard, heavy lifting part.
So I've been told.
Yes.
And you bicycle, and you're a gourmet chef, but that's not going to take up all your time. Are you going to go to a law firm? Are you going to teach? I think probably the opportunities for you in particular are limitless, simply because of the reputation that you have built in your time on the court.
First off, I'm not going to make any decision too quickly and see what the opportunities are. I'm surely going to teach. I've actually got an offer to teach in China and other places. I'll continue to do that. I'll write. I'll lecture. I'll be talking to students in other groups. I will not go back to practice law. I just really don't want to do that. And beyond that, I mean, I like working with my hands, physical labor. I'll do some of that. There's a lot of projects I want to get done, and I now have to kind of squeeze them in.
We have a deck that needs to be rebuilt.
Oh, I've done 4 decks, and I'm finishing up one for each. I mean, I really do decks well. I mean, I know how to make a deck, and I could build a bench and a railing. But I think I'm done with decks for a while.
Oh, okay.
So
timing is everything in life.
Yes, it is. I know.
So as we look around the world, and one thing I mentioned to you that I really want to discuss that's really very disturbing to me, and I'm conflicted about it, is our use of drones in warfare. And I think these drones have a very definite place, and I think they're here to stay, much like fracking for oil and gas is here to stay. It's just how we control
how we regulate it, exactly.
And I'm very disturbed.
And monitor it.
I'm very disturbed about how there is a lack of really good regulation there that's being fought. But drones, do we have the right to kill an American citizen in a foreign country because we suspect that he's involved with Al-Qaeda? To me, that's a no-brainer.
Okay. You've said some very important things along the line. Drones are here. They're here to stay. They're going to be used. You're now focusing on not the stopping of them, outlawing them, how they are used and what is appropriate. And then you said you're conflicted. That's also a very good insight, because we should be conflicted. I have a real problem myself, and I'm not speaking as a judge, but I have a real problem.
Unlikely it's going to come before the court.
Yeah, no, but it is clearly here the exercise of executive power. Okay, and you know from previous shows I was very, very troubled by the use of torture and the means by which the Abu Ghraib, the waterboard. See, and I come to this from the point of view was when I was in Algeria in the early 60s, I was with people who had been tortured by the French. And I've followed this issue, and torture generally doesn't work. The 0 Dark 30 or whatever aside. And you have to have a check and balance on the exercise of the type of power that the president seeks to exercise. And whether it's going to be a FISA court established by a Foreign Intelligence Security Act court, that was a very disturbing aspect.
Which it hasn't been so far.
No, there was a very nuanced but somewhat upsetting answer that Brennan gave yesterday when he was asked the question. I think it was Rufus King, the new senator from Maine.
Right.
Is it would a FISA type court, Foreign Intelligence Security type court, work to monitor it? And a very ambiguous answer. And then the other thing is that the danger, just like Alberto Gonzalez and his defining of torture and how broad and when it can be used, there's a very disconcerting aspect to the latest document that says when it can be used. See, I'm going to go back in history. I'm a historian. Civil War, countries in rebellion. Our most beloved president, Abraham Lincoln, he wasn't beloved at that time, suspends the right of habeas corpus. Solomon Chase, the author of Dred Scott, writes an opinion, says you can't do that. It's in the Maryland case. But you now have a Chief Justice in Wisconsin. They got a habeas suspension case in Wisconsin. And he writes this marvelous opinion saying the president can't do it. He said, there is no question that the president's motives are honorable, that he is acting in a patriotic mode, and he intends to follow the Constitution and the law. But my job as a judge is not to evaluate and judge his motives or intentions. I must judge the president on his acts, and his acts offend the Constitution, and I must say that he cannot do it. I think there's a role for the courts, and I think they should step forward on something like this when the executive says it can do.
Because otherwise, as you said, the executive has unfettered power, and we're talking about a right to confront, we're talking about warrants, we're talking about, and we've seen from the Patriot Act how the country overreacted to Congress, as it always does in an emergency, and did away with a lot of the Fourth Amendment guarantees, which I still haven't recovered from. But here, and we've had embarrassing situations in our history. Look what we did to Japanese Americans in World War II,
yes,
where we interned them because they were Japanese Americans. When those
and
people,
history doesn't
they became great fighters for us when they finally got the chance.
History doesn't treat that decision very well, and Justice Robert Jackson is quite revered for his dissent in that case, and that's why you have the judges who will speak up. See, there's another factor here. Now, by the way, I'm not unaware that this is a dangerous world. I mean, I was in Libya, I was in Tunisia. I mean, right there with, and I was informed later that I had terrorists around me at the time. But do we lower ourselves to that same level? Do we demean ourselves? Do we rob ourselves of our own humanity such that we come no better than the lowly terrorists? And
it's stepping into the jungle and becoming just another of the animals in the jungle that behaves that way.
But now
aren't we better than that?
Yeah, but now we revisit your earlier concept. You're conflicted. And you're conflicted because there may be some circumstances. There may be a situation where it's justified. But it should not be exercised in an arbitrary and capricious manner, and it should be subject to some type of vetting and review. There should
be some sort of due process.
Yes.
And due process, which is such an important part of our society, of our jurisprudence, due process has to come into play here. Somebody has to be able to look over the shoulder of an individual who makes that type of a decision. Now, in an emergency situation, I don't know. We hear that somebody is planting a bomb and it's going to be planted next Thursday, do we have the right to take that person out in this country or not? An American citizen. We have the right to do something, and
we have the right to defend ourselves.
And that's where I'm really,
and we do have the right
odds
to defend ourselves. And that's where, as it, and sometimes it's an emergency situation at your time, but anybody who knows that their act is subject to review will take out the arbitrary and capricious aspect to it, and it will be a more informed act. And that's all I'm saying, is that the system has to provide. I don't trust, the "I know better than you" type, or I'm in the better position to tell type.
Even with Osama bin Laden, even though the determination ultimately was made by the president, the so-called Chief Justice in that case, there were a lot of other people that contributed to it.
Oh yeah.
And that at least gave me some feeling that there was legality to it. From what I have heard about the drone situation, I don't get that type of comfort.
Well, that's why it's important that this whole thing gets vetted, because we don't know how the decision is made. We don't know exactly who makes the decision, what is the criteria, and that is worrisome. So I am very much in favor of what's happening is that, well, oh, by the way though, I don't like the hypocrites. When I see the same people that were defending the expansive memos of Gonzalez and others, and is it in justifying as to, well, it's okay, and now they turn around and criticize. Those people are off the charts as far as I'm concerned. They've lost credibility, and so is that you see me is that I was as critical about Gonzalez and President Bush as I am about Obama right now. Is it no? You need to have, and you need to find the ethical template.
And some consistency.
See, and consistency is how you approach it.
Yeah,
and that's critical to a form of government, form of country that we are in order to exist. So
now I came in here with a whole list of items that I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm looking at the time right now.
What did we miss out on? You never show me the list.
Well, I'm going to save it for the next time you're back. We're down now under a minute, and I just want to say that one of the great pleasures that I've had over the years is since we first met, which I think is 10 or 11 years ago, the many times you've been on here, the knowledge that you have imparted here, and as I've followed your decisions in your career, the fairness, the patience, and sometimes the anguish that you put into those decisions. You are, to me, the personification of what justice means, and it has really been a pleasure with you on the court, and I'm looking forward to it when you're not on the court.
When you talk about the anguish, actually, I brought my assistant, Elaine Svay, with me today, and I wish I could call her up and say, testify to the anguish. She knows. I mean, it's tough.
And we're out of time, so I'll just say
she's
thanks
saved
again.
by the clock. Okay.